Good morning. Sorry, I started late by 30 seconds, according to this watch. So, as I was putting this lesson together, this thing is just taking on a life of its own. Because as I studied, the more I realized just how ignorant I really am. And that's one of the things about Scripture. If you diligently study it and you want to know, you will realize just how ignorant you are. Because I have to fall into what I would call the extreme category compared to other people that have been studying the Bible. I'm 70 years old now, and I feel almost like an infant in my studies now. And most of it is a result of what the main part we'll talk about this morning is that part. But in thinking about it, and me and BC were talking earlier this week, and I mentioned this to BC, but I re-mentioned it to myself this morning when I was thinking about this, as I think this would be an appropriate intro to what we'll be talking about. And my intention is, I won't speak next week. BJ will be finishing up Romans, but the following week I will continue in this. And maybe you as the audience can tell me, we've had enough. Shut up. Do something else. So, if you would, turn to Luke 2. And for those of you that remember, I read from the New American Standard, and this is the early version of the New American Standard. There's like 2 or 3 different updates, if you want to call them that. So let's pick up in verse 41. This is Luke 2, verse 41. Now his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of the Passover. And when he became 12, they went up there according to the custom of the feast. And as they were returning after spending the full number of days, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem. But his parents were unaware of it, but supposed him to be in the caravan, and went a day's journey, and they began looking for him among their relatives and acquaintances. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem looking for him. Then after 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. Well, number one, we have parents that after a day or so, they probably thought, well, Jesus is a good kid. He's probably with somebody else. After all, how do we bring him up? To be responsible, to understand things? But after one day, and they get to looking around, they can't find him. How much of a panic do you get into if you're going to go look for your kid? Yeah, I can distinctly remember after this wise guy told my daughter, when you turn 18, you can come and go as you please. She put me to the test the very first day. By the time she was not home by 2 o'clock in the morning, dear old Dad was in a panic. Started making phone calls, waking people up. Well, I woke someone up just about the time my daughter walked through her friend's door, right down the street down here in a mobile home. We had a black Eagle Vision at that point in time, which was kind of a semi-hot rod production car. I about burnt the wheels off the thing getting over there. And when she got in that car, I told her, sit in the back seat. And when we got home, you could smell the brakes in our house through the enclosed garage. You could smell the brakes in that car, from that car, for about 2 hours. I was so upset. She couldn't understand. So then I had to clarify to bring about more understanding. Which brings me to, if you turn over to Proverbs, I believe it's Proverbs 22. Because Proverbs is going to be our topic here. But in Proverbs 22:6, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Well, I have to think about this. And this is where me and BC spoke. We were to speaking on this. And neither one of us had a really good answer at that point in time. But as I thought more about this morning, who taught Jesus from the very beginning of his life? Mom? Dad? Or was it wafted into his head through God? He was raised as a human being, wasn't he? He was tested in all ways as a human being. What kind of an unfair advantage would he get if it were otherwise? So we come to the temple, and here we get a little bit of a proof of the test of what his parents had done. They amazed these priests, or he amazed the priests. We don't know much more about the Father, but we think about this, and I turn inwards to myself, and I go, how good was I? And I didn't do as good a job as I should have, and I would readily admit it. And if you're a parent, you dig in and figure it out for yourself. You don't have to tell me or anybody else, but you'll know. Probably one of the biggest inputs I had in my life was my grandmother, Kelley. That's where I get my name from. And that woman was never afraid to speak up about the Bible when it came time. I look back and I draw courage from that. Some from my mother, none from my dad. None from my dad. My dad had the attitude that one church is as good as another. He was raised as a Methodist. What do you think they teach these days? So, with all of this, if you would, let's turn to Proverbs 1. And I don't intend for this to be a study on the entire book of Proverbs, okay? But the very first chapter gives us really good insight into what we need to know about what's coming in Proverbs. But it's intended, and this is the way I see this, is the way I read it and understand it, it's intended to open your eyes. So, let me read this. And maybe this is the way some people read this. I'm just going to read down to verse 8, okay? Or verse 7. And let me read it this way first. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of the king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to discern of sayings and understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge, discretion, a wise man here, increase in learning, a man of understanding, and acquire wise counsel, to understand a proverb and figure the words of the wise and riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Okay, that's the end of class. Let's go. You need me to go a little faster? What did you get out of that? What did you get out of this with me rattling on like an idiot up here?
Very little, except I knew about the 7,
Yeah.
about 4.
But what did we know before? She said it correctly. You got nothing out of this. What do you do when you read this and you just read it? Okay, I'm just going to read this collection of words here. How do you understand? Yeah, to study. You got to let it sink in. But me and BC, again, there's a few of the little topics that we talked on, because me and BC, I probably wore I call him the young man out with all these incessant questions I have. And you should have incessant questions. It's just like this. I think we know what the is. It's kind of like an article. It specifies something. The second word is a proverb. Well, what's a proverb? Anybody here that give me a ready answer for that?
Wise saying.
Wise saying? Tom? Bonnie?
I'd say instead of saying teaching,
Sage teaching? Okay.
teaching.
Okay. What is a proverb? A comparison. Okay. Well, let's just look here. Number one, it's a noun. And you know me, my proclivity for definitions of stuff, but this is what I illustrate this. We need to understand what we're reading. How can we understand it if we don't know what the words mean? For a proverb, the very title of what we're reading. Here's what the dictionary says. It's a noun. It's a brief, popular epigram or maxim. And then to the side, in great big blue letters, it says adage. Well, we'll come back to this. Do we really know what a proverb is now? Can anybody tell me what a maxim is? Or an adage? You know? An epigram? Or do we just have this hazy kind of, yeah, I kind of know, but I don't know. So, put you on the spot, put myself on the spot. Do I know? I intentionally did not look up what the explanation of the word for epigram is. I got a hazy idea. Or what a maxim is. I know a maxim are sometimes concerning ancient sayings. And then we have an adage. But this is something I would ask you to do. You can do it here while I'm up here blabbering on, or you can do it when you go home. Look it up, and then maybe next time we speak, I will ask, what does it mean? Now, why do I do all this? What's this explanation of this? The Proverbs of Solomon. Okay, Solomon must have wrote these things, or did he just think them up? Or was he imbued with this as getting wisdom straight from the Creator? Remember what his prayer was. What did he ask for? Wisdom. And in the book, and Randy went over this even in Ecclesiastes, he wrestled with this afterwards. Sometimes he applied correctly, and sometimes he did not. But he wanted to know. K-N-O-W. Let's go a little further. The Proverbs of Solomon, the son of David, king of Israel. There's an identifying statement, right? And right here, verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding. What in the world did he just say? To discern the sayings of understanding. Can anybody in here give me the definition of what it means to discern? Yeah. Do I step on the gas on a red light, or do I sit and stop? We've got the law. We discern that the law says red means stop, green means go.
Google AI says Proverbs is to bring divine truth into proper focus,
Now,
enabling us to look at life through God's eyes from His eternal, all-knowing point of view.
absolutely. You mean? This is what, see, right there, the title goes back to what it means. Now, she kind of took some of the things that were going to come later from me, but nevertheless, this is what this is about. So let's reread verse 2. To know wisdom and instruction. Well, what does that mean? Grasp the meaning of what it says. To know. If you're driving a car and you come up to a red light, what do you know to do? Stop. That doesn't mean, what was it in that movie Starman? Where he's driving along and all of a sudden he sees a yellow light and he just stomps on the gas and goes. And she goes, who taught you how to drive? Where'd you learn all this? Well, previously in the movie, she's driving along, she sees a yellow light, she stomps on the gas. Plows through what's going to be a red light. So he said, green means go, red means stop, yellow means go very, very fast. See? So we can come up with these fuzzy explanations for these things. Come back to know wisdom and instruction. What is this?
You see, it's common sense.
What is this, though?
That's the Bible. That's our user's manual.
Yeah, I've called it the instruction manual. You know, in the older days, whenever I was teaching quite a while back, I used to call it the manual for how to herd cats. If anybody's ever tried to herd a cat or hold one on a leash and go for a walk, we think about this. We think about the practicality of what it is to know and the instructions behind that. What do instructions tell you to do? They give you the idea or the thing to do. Even at my age, I'm still learning how to follow instructions. And you know, most of us learn how to follow instructions by doing it the hard way. We fail first.
Instructions are those things that men don't read when they're putting things together.
Absolutely. I already know it all. Don't tell me anything. I know. Leave me alone. To know wisdom and instruction. To discern the sayings of understanding. We'll come back to that again. By the way, the word instruction in Proverbs occurs 26 times in the New American Standard. If it occurs that many times, do you think that word might not be important? In application? Because, I mean, what do we read the Bible for? To know? Well, it's one thing to know, but what about application? We apply these things. Trust me, I have had a rush course in how to weld aluminum, and I found out that I don't know squat. I go and look at YouTube and see all this stuff, and all these experts are telling me how to do all these things. And the good guys really tell you, you just got to get out there and do it. This is one of those things, it's an acquired skill. But here, understanding, is that an acquired skill? Do we practice it? I'll illustrate it this way. When's the last time you sinned? Where was the understanding and the application there? See where this comes from? To know wisdom and instruction, to discern the sayings of understanding, to receive instruction in wise behavior. I'll illustrate this with a story that I was told yesterday from a good friend of mine in Las Vegas. I said, how things going? My friend's name's Jeff, and he's been doing part-time work for a guy named Gary in a motorcycle place. So how's things going at the shop with Gary? Well, it's okay. He's just paying me just strictly per job, but he doesn't pay me for all the extra stuff that I do. Well, that's kind of typical. And I said, well, yeah, and he's got this other worker. And he said, this other worker, he's got 3 kids from 3 different women, and he stays drunk most of the time. Decided to go over to the Hoover Dam, and on the way back, California Highway Patrol, the Nevada Highway Patrol sees him doing something he shouldn't be doing, so the chase is on. It ended up in a head-on collision at 80 miles an hour between another car coming at 70. Killed everybody in the other vehicle. Woman and child. A father and a mother and 2 children. And this guy had his 3 kids in his truck. He walked away from it, some injuries, and his kids are okay. What do you think about a situation like that? Well, some people say, well, it happens. That's just life. Well, yes, it is just life. But what would happen if maybe his dad had taught him, you don't drink beer? Or if you do, learn how to limit yourself. And I will profess to you, I'll drink a can of beer or a bottle of beer, 1, maybe 2 in a year. Period. Okay? I had the illustration of my father. My father, He didn't drink to excess, but if he drank one beer, he became a very harsh person to be around. It was just like a switch. I saw that and I said, not me. Through the years, if I ever, one time in my life, I'll tell you the story about it sometime, I decided to go out when I was about 16 or 17, get all liquored up, made a total fool out of myself. Said, never again, and I won't. So we come back to receive instruction in wise behavior. It's one thing to be instructed. It's another to apply it. Okay? Let's continue. Verse 3 again. To receive instruction in wise behavior, righteousness, justice, and equity. That middle word in that bottom part of that last ending was that word justice. Hopefully my memory will hold up to the point on the moment I die. But one of the most important lessons I ever heard came from Kelley, and I badgered him after he gave it the first time. I badgered him until he gave the lesson again. And the second lesson was better than the first. And it was the word justice. Well, we're going to cover it this morning. BC worked within the confines of what you call the Justice Department. What is justice? Well, what's the root word of justice? Yeah, it's kind of a complex meaning there. You'll come to find out the duality. Sometimes some words can carry 3 or 4 meanings. Just. What is just? Well, I was just sitting there and watching the baseball game. I was just doing this. He was just over there. You see how the quick little changes can come. Justice. How much do we really know about righteousness? Don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, do that. Well, is it righteous to not love God? You think about that for just a minute. What all is contained and what is encompassed within that word righteous. Same with justice and equity. Now, we're seeing here, and I don't mean to be political. This isn't political. This has to do with the church and me and you, all of us. What kind of equity are we seeing now? The word games that are being played with us. All of these people that want to change their sex, they want to do this, they want to do that. Are they more equal than we are? What is equal? Okay, equity. What is this equity that we are allowing to happen doing to society? In particular, young people. Teaching little kids from the first grade about weird distortions of how our Creator has created us. Certain things here do need to be stopped. Let's go a little further. I'm going to come back on these things and we're going to expound a little bit more on this when we'll get good definitions and meanings and understandings of this. Verse 4, to give prudence to the naive. Prudence. I've given that definition before also. And what does it mean to be naive? Are we being naive when it comes to that guy over there is a teacher in the school and he came to school with these gigantic things hanging off his chest? Did anybody read the news stories about that? The teacher in Canada? It took nearly a year for them to make up a decision whether that should be allowed or not. A man wandering around with these things hanging out. What about equity? How do we make up our mind about equity? Who do we protect? Old guys like me, old ladies, from this equity? How were we raised? It's a totally different time, wasn't it, Joe? Completely different time when we were being raised. Now, what do parents do? Get your phone, get a game. Do anything but pay attention. Because I'm too busy on my phone or my computer, my life is first, not yours. There's one of the things that's given. We do have that responsibility. And you think in judgment we won't be asked about it? So now Kelley Roberts, me, is trying to make up for that by teaching my daughters more, try and teach them when I can. How many of you that are grown, you have your grown children, they get kind of what's called hard-headedness? Do the words just kind of boing, bounce out? They don't do anything? Responsibility comes with this. Verse 4, to give prudence to the naive, to the youth, knowledge and discretion. Boy, that discretion is a big word these days. Let's go a little further. A wise man will hear and increase in learning. Have you asked this question? Remember when I read this thing through just about as fast as I could verbally pronounce these words? How much more have you learned just in these 4 verses or 5 verses when you just slow down and read it? You apply what your teachers were supposed to teach you when you were a kid. Yeah, sure, they were supposed to teach you ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, those sort of things. But what were they really teaching you? What did Jesus' dad teach him and his mom? Verse 5, a wise man will hear and increase in learning. Does that say a stupid man or, an Einstein will hear and increase in learning? Not all of us are given the same ability thinking-wise. Don't know why, but that's the way it is. But what's to stop someone from helping you to learn how to think? And this is one of the things that I'm seeing in schools now, or hearing about in schools. These kids are not being taught how to think, except maybe about weird stuff, rather than learning how to actually think. As good as it is, it's also can be used as an enemy. So, yeah, just simple things. And it's I have to say, the blame comes square on my shoulders, or my generation. We were the fruit of stuff that had been taught starting in the 1930s in the universities. And they knew, the people that were teaching it knew within 2 to 3 generations it would start to surface. And we started seeing it in the late 50s, maybe the mid 50s with rock and roll. And I'm not saying, I like listening to some of that music, but if you really get to listening to the words and the music, all of a sudden it starts to happen. It's just like around 1951, 52, or 53, I can't remember which. I think it was 53. We got Playboy magazine right there on open display, and it's for sale. Did we say, no, we can't have that? Our forefathers had the good sense to say, we cannot allow the sale of heroin. We cannot allow the sale of marijuana, because they saw it for what it is. I heard a song on the radio the other day. Something, I forget what the exact words were, but the end words were, get high and stay high. Well, again, that can have a duality of meaning. High on what? High on life? High on Jesus? High on dope? Discernment. That needs to be taught to our children. Yeah, BC.
Kelley, I think when we take a look at this, I think one of the biggest problems we have nowadays is, kids weren't sent to school back in the biblical times. Family was required to teach them. And I think, if we send our kids to school and expect that the kids are going to be taught to think by school teachers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's more liberal stuff that's creeping into schools every day now. I think some teachers still very well intentioned. The problem is that as parents, we're no longer doing what Deuteronomy 6 says.
Yeah.
We're not sitting down with young children and teaching them, and continue to teach them. And you're right, at some point they are going to get a little bit stubborn because they're trying to figure themselves out. But if you've instilled good teaching in them as parents,
Mm-hmm.
they'll figure it out at some point. That's not to say they're not going to stray,
Yeah.
but at some point they'll figure it out. But I think, we can't blame it on just music. We can't just blame it on other things.
Oh, it's
Our responsibility at home, going back to Deuteronomy 6 and how we're supposed to start teaching our children.
It's everything. It's a combination of all the things that BC talked about. What about poor teachers? Anybody in here have poor teachers? I can remember the good teachers. I don't remember the bad teachers. Okay? I could go on and on with the thoughts on this very thing. But the recent introductions of all this stuff about sex, it's just these people are turning these little kids into being obsessed with this. What kind of teaching is that? It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Okay?
I'm glad that Randy's teaching this.
Yeah,
Just on the solid.
absolutely. Yeah.
We as a church neglect in teaching our children about that.
Absolutely. The thing is, how many kids are sitting in here to listen to it? Hopefully the parents can do that. So, I've got a granddaughter. And I think I've told BC, most of you know that I've stressed from the get-go. Don't let that child go to public school. Not until public schools eradicates some of this crazy things that they're teaching kids.
If you'll ever be around children who have been homeschooled, you're going to find that their level of intelligence far exceeds what you're going to find
Yeah.
in most public schools.
Yeah. Again, a lot of it goes back to how good are the teachers. I've got a friend. He owns one of the biggest businesses in Weslaco, and his wife was on Channel 5 News for a long time. She quit Channel 5 to raise and homeschool her kids. And their kids, one of the things that she absolutely hammered on them was the Constitution. The Constitution contains tremendous common sense, just common sense. So let's go on a bit more. Verse 5, a wise man will hear and increase in learning, and a man of understanding will acquire wise counsel. What does it mean to be wise? Is that just applying, like I used that illustration of burning myself on the hand on the stove, and then you come back and you know not to do it? Part of that is fear. Remember the lesson I gave on fear being a guardian? Well, I'll elaborate on that more a little further down the road. But to be wise, I look over here at Tom and Bonnie, and I'm thinking, Tom is a wise guy. And I'm not talking about a wise mouth. I'm talking about a wise guy. Okay? We're just about out of time. Let's wrap this up. We're just going to read down to chapter or verse 7. Well, we'll read all of our Proverbs here in about 2 minutes. Now, verse 6, to understand a proverb and a figure. Is he talking about 2 plus 2? That's figuring. Or are we talking about a statue? What are they talking about here? To understand a proverb and a figure.
Mine says enigma.
Okay.
King James says enigma.
Yeah.
That's an enigma is something that there's no validity.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like something that's not based.
Okay.
I guess many people call Christianity an enigma.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Now, to understand a proverb and a figure, the words of the wise and their riddles. Let me give you a riddle right quick. Okay? Let's see if anybody can answer this. And don't look it up. Put the phone down. I got 2 of them here. I'll select the linkier one of the 2. And if you already know this, don't answer. But if you do know it, don't answer. Figure it out. Because this is what Proverbs is telling us. Figure out riddles. How many of you think maybe Scripture is? There's things in Scripture that are riddles. The man who built it doesn't want it. The man who bought it doesn't want it. The man who is using it doesn't know he is using it. What is it? Let me read that again. The man who built it doesn't want it. The man who bought it doesn't want it. The man who is using it doesn't know he is using it. What is it? What is it? After class, if you want to know what the answers is, come over here and I'll tell you. Or come, just wave me over and I'll tell you. Verse 7, we'll finish up. The fear of the Lord, there's that word fear. We'll get into the definitions on some of these things the next time we speak. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Just the beginning. You're just getting started. And the brilliant despise wisdom and instruction. Is that what your Bible says? The Bible says fools. What is a fool? Well, I'll tell you what I think may be a good definition because I illustrated it a while ago. This man that would not stop drinking beer wound up killing 4 people. Not intentionally. But where did the foolishness start? When he probably chose to ignore someone that said, stop your drinking. Or even within himself. What is a fool? Sometimes I look at myself and I'm going, what a fool I am. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. So with this proverb right here, the very beginning, he tells us what this book is about. And I would say that if you'll study it, when we come back over this, because I'll only cover this maybe 1 or 2 more times, I want you to teach me. Okay? I've already learned a few things from the comments that were made this morning. Because after all, who knows everything? Anybody in here? You got an answer for that riddle yet? Okay, we'll call it a day. Thank you. Yeah. So, I mean, what did they know? And they passed it on. Absolutely. Yeah. How many people, I use math as an example, how many people just shut down on higher level math? Is your math level just good enough to balance your checkbook and that's it? Or can you go on beyond that? We got an ex-engineer sitting over here. He had to learn math. And he also applied it, didn't he? Once you learn these things, then you know practical application. That's what Proverbs is about, practical application. Anything I've said that's an error, please let me know. Thank you.